Very loud voice. Okay, so we will begin with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then we do 3 times the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so we are continuing now with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of the Fours. And now we come to Sutta number 157. So the theme of this sutta, it actually has 2 themes. The first will be a general statement about illness, and then it will move to 4 kinds of illness that pertain to the monastic person. Okay, so first the 2 kinds of illness. So what are the 2? There's bodily illness and mental illness. And maybe it's quite an act of foresight by the Buddha to even speak so many centuries ago about a kind of illness that we would call mental illness. Yeah, the sutta uses the expression kayika rogo and chaitasika rogo. Let me put that into the notes. So rogo is illness, and kaya is body, chitta is mind. So the adjectives come out kayika rogo and chaitasika rogo. So now, since probably in Western medicine, even any kind of systematic knowledge of mental illness maybe was not recognized until the 19th century. Of course, there was a recognition that people will go mad if they go, completely psychotic or schizophrenic or paranoia. Then it would be recognized that they're suffering from some kind of mental illness. But the Buddha has a very, very broad conception of mental illness, as we'll see. So he continues by saying that there are people who might claim to enjoy bodily health for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, even 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, even for 100 years. I think some of us, maybe we've heard of people who live to be the age of 80, 90, or even 100 years, and they say that they've never been ill a single day in their life. Somehow it's difficult to believe that, but this is what some people say. But the Buddha continues, apart from those whose taints have been destroyed, that is, apart from the arahants, it is hard to find people in the world who can claim to enjoy mental health even for a moment. So what is the reason why people suffer from mental illness in the Buddha's conception? So that is, of course, we have lots of people not psychotic, not afflicted with disabling neuroses, not subject to bipolar condition, not subject to psychotic conditions, paranoia, schizophrenia, and so on. But still, the Buddha will say that they cannot claim mental health even for a moment. So what are the underlying causes, or let's say the manifestations of mental illness, according to the Buddha? That's my question.
Inability to still the mind.
The taints,
Yeah, that's a good. Somebody said the inability to still the mind. So lack, you could say lack of mental inner peace, lack of quietude. Somebody else had something to say? I heard it.
Sakya.
Let's not be so technical about that. Let's just take things that will be clear in our own sort of immediate experience.
avidya.
Again, that's using a technical term. Sort of
Worries and
Greed
anxiety.
and anger.
okay, that's a good one. I just heard somebody say ill will and anger. Is that what you said?
Yes, Bhante.
Yeah, yeah. So people get angry easily, and then they bear ill will. And so when you get angry and you're suffering from ill will, then there's no peace of mind, no inner happiness. Okay, so what are some other manifestations of mental illness?
Craving.
Okay, craving. Craving is, in fact, that's a very good suggestion. Because we have, especially we could see people who have virtually all the luxuries and conveniences of life, but they're not satisfied. People who are multimillionaires, billionaires, and when it comes, this is the situation here in the United States, when it comes to filling out their income tax form in order to pay their fair share of taxes to contribute to social well-being, they search for every kind of escape route they can discover in order to avoid paying the taxes. Just this morning, I was reading an article from the Oxfam website. Let me just get this. Yeah, there was just this past week a bombshell leak about from the Internal Revenue Service revealed that America's 25 richest billionaires paid only 3% in income tax between the year 2014 and 2018. The average American family pays 14% federal income tax. But somebody like Warren Buffett, who has holdings worth $108 billion, paid only 0.1%. And so these people, extraordinarily wealthy, what are they going to do with all of that wealth? They probably don't know, but still they're not satisfied with what they have, and they won't even pay the fair amount of income tax. And then we have all sorts of, cravings that are perpetually just dominating the mind, driving the mind into the state of insatiable thirst, this kind of restlessness, so that we can never settle back and enjoy our life in the present, whether it's a craving for wealth, craving for possessions, obsession with clothes, have to build up a big wardrobe, always buying new clothes, buying new cars. There are some people, extremely wealthy people, have to own 5 or 6 homes, one home in the United States, a home in the Bahamas, another home in Switzerland, maybe a home in a Pacific island. Okay, so craving is a kind of mental illness. Any other ideas?
Conceit.
Conceit, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. Conceit. So people always have to build up their sense of ego, have to think, I'm better than the others, I'm more important than the others. And so often conceit and craving work hand in hand. So that's in order to build up one's sense of self-worth, of self-value, through craving, one has to acquire more wealth and more possessions. Then one could pride oneself that I have the best car on the market. I have the most beautiful home in the neighborhood. I'm the most intelligent person, the most gifted person. Any other kinds of conceit? Any other kinds of mental health?
Jealousy?
Fear.
Wait, too many people speaking at once.
Fear.
Jealousy?
Jealousy, that's a very, very good suggestion. So sometimes jealousy can be an extremely debilitating obsession of the mind, particularly the jealousy that arises over matters of love, romantic love. So
Low self-esteem.
Restlessness and doubt.
wait, I was going to elaborate a little bit on jealousy from my own past experience as a young man. You fall in love with a girl, and then you see that girl, you go to a dance with her, and another boy asks her to dance, and then you're sitting on the sidelines, but you're always looking over. Oh, she smiled. He said something to her, and she smiled at him. Oh, I'm going to lose her. Oh, she's falling in love with him. I have to keep a close watch on her. Now, next dance comes, and I go over to ask her to dance, but he's there first. He got to her first. Then the dance is over, and I go up and I ask her, shall I take you home? Oh, Richard has already invited me to go home. He has offered to take me home. And oh, the mind is in such misery, even to the point that hiding in the bushes, I watch them as they leave the dance hall and secretly follow them as they go home. So that's a kind of sickness, no? Any other ideas?
Low
Rest and doubt.
I'm hearing two. Okay, doubt.
Righteousness.
Low self-esteem.
Okay, doubt. Somebody else said something?
Righteousness.
Yeah, well, I think we already covered restlessness. But doubt could be a kind of sickness.
Fear.
Yeah, but
Fear.
let's take a little, dwell a little bit on doubt. So this could be a kind of religious doubt in religious matters. I mean, this is what maybe many of us who come from a non-Buddhist background experience. When we first encounter Buddhism, you know, we're so impressed by it. You know, especially the Buddha's teachings seem so practical. There's suffering, craving, the end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path, very clear, the practical path of practice. But then we read there's this rebirth into different realms of existence. There are gods, there are hell realms, hungry ghosts, and this karma, our actions are supposed to lead to rebirth into these realms. So where is all of that clarity, that pragmatic emphasis of the teaching? We have this very, very broad speculative cosmology, and then doubt arises. Is it really true? Can I believe this? Where is my evidence for this? Maybe the Buddha was just being swept away by visions that he had in meditation. And so we go through this period of uncertainty, of doubt. Can I believe it? Should I doubt it? Okay, fear. Somebody mentioned fear. Of course, there are certain kinds of rational fear. So if you're crossing the street, you have to have a healthy fear of the cars that are swift, that are quickly driving down the road, and you have to wait either till the road is clear or till you have the green light for crossing. But there's a kind of maybe neurotic fears, obsessive fears. Okay, I think we've seen enough illnesses of the mind, so you get the idea. Okay, but now the sutta is going to swing over to 4 kinds of illnesses that afflict a monk or afflict monastics, monks and nuns. But maybe monks are more subject to these illnesses than nuns. Okay, there is a monk can have strong desire for robes. These are what are called the 4 requisites of the monastic life. Robes, alms food, lodging as a dwelling place, or medicines and provisions for the sick. Maybe not many have strong craving for medicines and provisions for the sick, but okay, take the case of a robe. You know, you might imagine that the Buddha says that the monk should be content with any kind of robe.
But the Roga Sutra, you said the body and the mind.
Yeah, please, when I'm speaking, please, people who are online, don't speak unless I ask for questions or comments. And otherwise, you should be muted. Other people should be muted. Okay, so the ideal for the monk is to be content with any kind of robe. But you might not believe this, but there are very subtle and distinct stylistic tastes amongst monks when it comes to robes. Maybe the main distinction is in the color of the robe. There are maybe there's a distinction of like 2 main stylistic differences in the colors of the robes. There are robes which are bright orange or bright sort of reddish orange. And then there are the robes that are sort of reddish brown, sometimes maroon brown, or mustard colored robes. And the robes that are reddish brown, brownish, mustard colored are considered the signs of the forest monk, whereas the robes that are bright orange or yellow orange are considered the robes of the town or city monk. And so sometimes if one is offered a reddish orange robe and one wants to present oneself as a forest monk, then one will not be content with the reddish orange robe. But of course, there's a way to get over that problem, and that is to dye the robe, to dye it a brownish color. In fact, that's what we used to do in Sri Lanka. In the place where I was staying in my early years as a monk, we would get the bright orange robe, but we would dye them brownish color. Okay, then comes alms food. So ideally, one should be content with whatever food one receives, but some monks are not content, and they, scheme and plan to get the kind of food that they want or lodging that they want. Okay, so this is the first kind of sickness for the monk, not being content with the requisites that one gets. Then the second kind of sickness, and this is an intensification of this. So when one has this strong desire for and this discontent with the requisites that one is getting, then one gives way to this evil desire for gain, honor, and praise. Because it's said that when a monk becomes famous, popular, praised, and esteemed by others, then people think that monk is a field of merit, and then they want to make offerings to that monk. So when you become famous, famous and receives honor and praise, then many people will come and offer robes, and so you have your own choice. Whatever kind of robe you want to wear, you could choose the robe that you like. You get invitations to the houses for meals, and people will offer very delicious, well-prepared alms food. People will build a monastery for you or build a cottage for you. Okay, so honor, getting gain, honor, and praise is the way to receive the requisites that one wants. So first one gives way to evil desire, and then one strives and makes an effort for this gain, honor, and praise. That's the third kind of sickness. Then the fourth one, I don't quite actually, I have to confess, I don't fully understand it, but it says that here the monk, in the grip of this craving for the requisites, approaches families cunningly. He approaches families. Cunningly, he sits down. Cunningly, he speaks on the Dharma. So you can see that these are the ways in which the monk is trying to gain the robes, alms food, lodgings that he wants. So he'll come to the homes of the families and give them Dharma talks in order to win their respect and esteem, in the hope that they will make offerings to him. Yeah, but the last one, I don't quite understand the intention of this. It says, cunningly, he holds in his excrement and urine. I want to see what words the Pali text uses. Yeah, the word that's translated cunningly is sankhaya, which has a sense of having planned, having made a plan, having formulated designs. And probably what's being suggested here is that the monk comes to the homes of the families and starts teaching them Dhamma, because in the back of the mind, his intention is to make a favorable impression on them so that they will offer him the things that he wants. But then we have Uchara Pasava Sandareti. So Sandareti means to support, to hold up, and Uchara is feces, and Pasava is urine. So he holds up, or maybe holds in, his feces and urine. But I don't quite get the sense. Maybe, does anybody have any idea about this? You know, you don't.
Maybe they too shy and they wanna appear holy. That happened to
Maybe
me.
Wait,
Like,
let her speak. Please,
so
Anfang, please speak.
like when I wanna make an impression with someone, I wouldn't ask to use their toilets because I
I
feel
see.
shy.
Oh, that's a
And
good
wanna,
idea.
yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I was thinking too, Bante.
Okay, what, Wiley?
Bante, I know some people will try or make an exhibition out of sitting for a very long period of time, maybe 2 days. And could that perhaps be it? that they would sit as a spectacle for a long period of time and plan it?
I don't think in this case, because they're going to the house and then
Mhm.
they will speak on the Dhamma there. So it's not like they'll be like sitting in a meditation position for extremely long period of time.
Okay.
But it says that cunningly he holds in the excrement and urine. Yeah, it's a little,
Maybe, maybe he does not have
Thank
a
you,
pure
Bhante.
body.
wait, one person at a time.
Maybe he does not have a pure body. Like he has excrement and urine inside of him. So he should be clean before he, goes to the family and gives his dharma talk.
Yeah, I just don't know. Maybe the idea, if I could be a little coarse, is that when he's speaking on doing all of these things, to use the American expression, he's doing so full of shit. Maybe this is the old Indian way of expressing that idea. Anyway, so those are the 4 illnesses of the monk. And though the sutta mentions just the 4 basic requisites, but nowadays, I have to say a little sadly, the monks do things like this with the intention of getting many more things than the 4 basic requisites. Getting a car, offering of a car. Of course, many monasteries do need cars, but the monk wants to get a high quality, super luxury car just for himself to get the most various technological equipment. Yeah, you could use your imagination to think of other things that monks might want to get. Okay, so this is, so then the Buddha ends with a kind of exhortation to the monks. Therefore, you should train yourself thus. We will not have these strong desires and be discontent with any kind of robe and so on. We will not submit to the evil desires. And then we will patiently endure cold and heat, hunger and thirst, contact with flies, mosquitoes, and so on. So that is the way you should train. So this indicates that living under very primitive or simple conditions, one should endure the difficulties that one encounters with patience and with energy, with determination, not being overcome by them. Okay, we'll take a few sutras and then we could take some questions. So now we come to the sutta on decline, spoken by Venerable Sariputta. So he says, any monk or nun, and here he brings in the bhikkhuni, who observe 4 things within, can come to the conclusion, I am declining, deteriorating in regard to wholesome qualities. So what are the 4? So the first 3 are quite obvious. An abundance of raga, of lust, abundance of hatred, dosa, and abundance of delusion. Then the 4th one, again, is a bit obscure. And again, I'm going to take the Pali and paste in the Pali. Yeah, I have to ask people who are not speaking to mute themselves. I'm getting. Okay. So this is the Pali that is used for that expression. Okay, some gambira means profound or deep. Okay, we'll skip over Tana, Tanesu. Panya Chaku is, Panya is of course wisdom and Chaku is the eye. So this is the eye of wisdom. Then the verb kamati means literally to walk. or to move. In this case, it's negated. Their eye of wisdom does not move, does not walk in Tana and Uttana. And one of the meanings of Tana is what is possible, and the negation. Uttana is what is impossible. And this is said to be one of the special knowledges of the Buddha, that the Buddha has this special knowledge. It's one of his sort of the qualities that come along with his attainment of supreme enlightenment, the ability to know what is possible and what is impossible. So the Buddha says, for example, that it is impossible that a deed done on account of greed, hatred, or delusion will bring desirable fruits, pleasant fruits, whereas it is possible that a deed done on account of greed, hatred, or delusion will bring painful results, undesirable results. Then he'll say it is impossible that a deed done motivated by generosity, by kindness, by wisdom will produce painful results, where it is possible that a deed motivated by generosity, by loving kindness, by wisdom will bring desirable and pleasant results. And so there are suttas in which the Buddha goes through a whole multitude of items explaining what is possible, what is impossible. But that is said to be a special knowledge of the Buddha. So it's a little bit puzzling to me, at any rate, why the Buddha says that even in the case of a monk or nun, that their eye of wisdom should move among these deep cases of what is possible or impossible. In any case, these are said to be the cases of decline for a monk or a nun. Let me get back to the sutta. And then the converse, any monk or nun who observes four things within themselves can come to the conclusion, I am not declining in wholesome qualities. Or we could say, I am making progress in wholesome qualities. So what are these four? That is the reduction of lust, the reduction of hatred, the reduction of delusion, and their wisdom eye moves or walks in these deep matters of what is possible and impossible. And I looked at the commentary on the sutta to see if it provides any help, and it was not especially helpful. It just glosses the words tana, atana with karana, akarana, which means cause and not cause. But anyway, with a little reflection, one could think, even though a monk or nun might not have that full, comprehensive knowledge of what is possible and what is impossible that the Buddha will have, but still through their wisdom, their eye of wisdom, they will have some, I would say, a clear idea of things that are possible and things that are impossible. For example, they will know that it's impossible, for example, to have calmness and clarity of mind if one doesn't practice mindfulness and clear comprehension. They'll understand that it is impossible for one to, say, to attain deep samadhi, to attain the jhanas, if one indulges in frivolous types of entertainment, if one engages in a lot of gossip and chit-chat, whereas it's possible to gain deep samadhi, to attain the jhanas, if one resorts to secluded dwelling place and one observes the precepts and one trains oneself in restraint of the sense faculties and so on. It's impossible, again, continuing, to gain insight into the real nature of phenomena if one doesn't contemplate methodically the 5 aggregates, whereas it's possible to gain deep insight into the nature of things if one contemplates the 5 aggregates. Yeah, so these are cases that are possible and impossible that come within the range of the wisdom eye of a monk or nun, even without becoming a fully enlightened Buddha. Okay, I don't want to take questions now because I want to move in to the next sutta, which is extremely interesting sutta. Oh, actually, there is a sutta where the Buddha explains how a monk is skilled in what is possible and impossible. That's Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 115. But I want to take sutta number 159 now, since this is a sutta with a very interesting background story and very interesting discourse by the Venerable Ananda. Okay, so the background story that we find in the sutta itself is that, okay, it's speaking about the Venerable Ananda who's living at Kosambi, certain park in Kosambi, and then a bhikkhuni, a certain nun, addresses a man, that would be like a layman, who's probably an attendant at the monastery. And she says, go to the Venerable Ananda, pay homage in my name, pay homage to him in my name, and then tell him, Bhante, the bhikkhuni so-and-so, the text doesn't mention her name, is sick, very ill. She pays homage to the Venerable Ananda. And then she says it would be good if out of compassion, Master Ananda would come to visit that bhikkhuni in her living quarters. Okay, the underlying story here, which is not stated explicitly in the sutta itself, is that this nun, okay, we have a little soft music in the background. This nun had fallen in love with Venerable Ananda. Apparently, it seems to me, and this is just my guess, is that the sutta is taking place after the passing away of the Buddha, because it doesn't mention the Buddha as dwelling someplace, any place. And I know from other suttas that after the Buddha passed away, Venerable Ananda spent a lot of time in Kosambi. And so my thought is that at the time the Buddha passed away, my guess is that Venerable Ananda might have been about 50 years old. I think he might have been about 30 years younger than the Buddha. So even though he's not exactly a spring chicken or a spring rooster in the prime of life, but still he could be somewhat handsome. And so the nuns often had very, very strong affection for the Venerable Ananda. And so it seems that he was quite a handsome man. And this nun must have fallen in love with Ananda, and she wants to get Ananda to come close to her. And using her illness, maybe as a fake feigned illness as a means to engender pity in Ananda, hoping that through pity, Ananda would then give rise to affection towards her, and that affection would turn into an emotional attachment. And then she could use that emotional attachment to catch Ananda and pull him down from his monastic life. And then the two of them would disrobe together and go off and enjoy their romance. That's my conjecture about the background story here. Okay, so this man goes off to the side of the monastery where the monks are living, and he comes to Venerable Ananda, delivers the message, and then the Venerable Ananda consents by silence. What seems a bit puzzling to me here, I don't know how to explain this. In other suttas, even when a layman, a male, sends a message to the monks, when there's a man, a layman who is sick, and sends a message to the monks saying, let the Venerable Sariputta come to visit me, I'm sick, or let Venerable Ananda come to visit me, I'm sick. Whenever one of those monks goes, even to the house of a layman, he doesn't go alone, but he'll always go with another monk as his attendant. And it would seem to be especially the case that if a monk, even an arahat, is going to visit a bhikkhuni in the bhikkhuni's quarters, that they would have another monk coming along, accompanying them. But in this case, it seems that Venerable Ananda goes alone, because the sutta doesn't mention him being accompanied by another monk, which is what is stated in all of the other suttas where the monk goes with an attendant. It will say, then the Venerable Ananda went to Anatta Pindika's house with the Venerable, let's make up the name, the Venerable Sobhita as his attendant. But here it just says Venerable Ananda went to the bhikkhuni's quarters. Okay, when the nun, the bhikkhuni, sees the Venerable Ananda coming in the distance, and this seems a little bit strange, she covers herself from the head down and lies down on her bed. Well, probably we say she lies down on the bed and covers herself from the head down. Yeah, there's a Chinese parallel to the sutta in the Sangyukt Agama. And in that parallel, when the bhikkhuni sees Ananda approaching, then she exposes her body. And then when Ananda sees, in other words, she reveals probably her breast. When Venerable Ananda sees her exposed, then he draws in his senses and turns away. Then the nun feels ashamed and puts on her clothes. And then she offers Ananda the seat, and then Ananda sits down and gives her the discourse. Okay, but the Pali version is a little different. And it seems to me, just my own opinion, that the Pali version maybe is indicating a subtler strategy of seduction than in the Chinese parallel. That here the nun is trying to evoke or provoke pity in Ananda, hoping that that pity will shade off into romantic affection and bring Ananda down. Okay, but Ananda, probably when he sees what the nun has done, he catches on to her strategy. And then he gives her a discourse. So he says, this body has originated from nutriment, from food. And in dependence on nutriment, nutriment is to be abandoned. This body has originated from craving, and in dependence on craving, craving is to be abandoned. This body has originated from conceit, and in dependence on conceit, conceit is to be abandoned. This body has originated from sexual intercourse, but in regard to sexual intercourse, the Blessed One has declared the demolition or destruction of the bridge. Maybe I'll come to the explanation. Yeah, we'll come to the explanation of that expression at the end. Okay, now that is the brief statement of the teaching that Ananda is going to give. But now he's going to elaborate on each of these points. So let's look at the elaboration. Okay, so he says, okay, first it said the body has originated from nutriment, and in dependence on nutriment, nutriment is to be abandoned. So first, the way the body has originated from nutriment. So even when the fetus is in the mother's womb, the body requires to be sustained by the nutriment that the mother consumes. The mother consumes food, and then the nutrients from that food go into the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream, they pass into the fetus in the womb. And that way the body originates from nutriment, and the body continues to be sustained by nutriment. We have to go on eating day after day after day. But in the case of the Buddhists, the practice of the Buddha's teaching, one has to sustain the body by consuming food, but yet one uses the food wisely, not with craving for taste and enjoyment, but one uses the food with wise reflection in order to abandon nutriment. Not that one could overcome the need for nutriment in this life, but one gains liberation. And then with the ending of the cycle of rebirth, there's no more no more dependence on nutriment in the future. And so this is part of our monastic training, that when we take food at the beginning of the meal, we reflect Pindapatang Patisevami Nevadavaya Namadaya Namadhanaya Navipusanaya Yavadevi Masakaya Satitya Yapanaya Vihingsugaratiya Brahmachari Anugahaya Iti Puranancha Vedanang Patiyan Kami Devancha Vedanang Na Upade Sami Yatra Chame Bhavisati Anavajitacha Paso Viharo Chati. And so we reflect on the reasons for using food. So first, 4 purposes by which people use food are negated, rejected. We don't use food as a kind of amusement, to have fun. We don't use food to be intoxicated with the taste. Oh, I like this taste, I like that taste. Let me try a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We don't use the food in order to make the body beautiful by developing a strong, attractive body, not for physical beauty and attractiveness. But then we have the 4 reasons, the positive reasons for using the food. Actually, 2 of these are almost synonymous: for the support and maintenance of this body. In other words, for the sustaining the body, for avoiding harm, since if one doesn't get enough good nutrients, then the body will fall ill. or will become malnourished and become susceptible to illness. And then for assisting the spiritual life, in order to continue one's practice, one has to keep the body strong and healthy and well nourished. And then one considers, thus I shall terminate or put an end to the old feeling, the feeling of hunger, and not arouse a new feeling, a feeling of intoxication, of delight through the enjoyment of the food. And one reflects that by using the food with mindfulness and clear comprehension, I will be healthy and I will be blameless, since I'm not using the food, I'm not abusing the food that I use, and I can dwell at ease. And so by using the food with wise reflection, one is depending upon the nutriment, but in this way, one will abandon nutriment. Let's see the note on this. Yeah, this is from the commentary. It says that based on the present nutriment, using it carefully, one abandons the nutriment consisting in past karma, but the craving for present edible food should be abandoned. Not all that helpful. But my understanding here would be that by using the nutriment, by undertaking the practice, one abandons the craving for the nutriment. And so one will continue to use the nutriment without craving. And then by ending craving, one ends the cycle of repeated existence, and then one will not be dependent on nutriment in the future. And so here, Ananda sums up and says that this body has originated from nutriment, and in dependence on nutriment is to be abandoned. So that is the explanation. Then the second part of the teaching. This body has originated from craving, and in dependence on craving is to be abandoned. So how has this body originated from craving? This can be understood maybe in two ways. First, the reason why we acquire this body, why we have come into this existence with this physical body, is because of our bhava tanha, the craving for existence from our previous life. When we passed away in our previous life, the craving was still present at the time of death. And that craving drove the stream of consciousness into a new form of existence. And so we picked up this body through the craving from the previous life. So that's one way in which craving is the origin of this body. The other way, which is maybe makes sense even from a secular point of view, is through the craving for sexual enjoyment of our mother and father. So they had craving to enjoy sexual relations. They had the relations, and then through that intercourse, the sperm encountered the egg, and that started the process that resulted in this physical body. Okay, so the body has originated from craving, but in dependence on craving is to be abandoned. And here Ananda gives an example. So he hears, so a certain monk hears that another monk has attained the destruction of the asavas, that he has attained the taintless liberation of mind, the liberation by wisdom in this very life itself. And so then when he hears about this, then that gives rise to, in his mind, to a craving to attain that liberation himself. So he thinks, let me also attain liberation of mind, the liberation by wisdom. And so then he's motivated by this craving, and motivated by that craving, he takes up the practice. He practices very diligently. And when he undertakes the practice of developing the samadhi, and then based on samadhi develops insight. And when his insight comes to its peak, he eradicates craving, and then he gains the liberation of mind. So here we could say that the text is speaking of craving in a positive way as a motivation for undertaking the practice. And this is quite unusual. But usually the text will use a different word to indicate the kind of desire that is needed to undertake the practice. That word is chanda. So this is the word that we usually translate as desire, and sometimes is qualified as being kusala chanda, wholesome desire. And almost everywhere else in the text, apart from this sutta, craving is spoken of in a negative way, as being something to be abandoned. But here, I think Ananda is in a way maybe engaging in a kind of wordplay by using the word craving to represent that wholesome desire, the desire that motivates a practitioner to develop the practice and then to attain liberation. Okay, so that is how in dependence on craving, the craving to enjoy that taintless liberation of mind, craving is to be abandoned. Okay, the next section of the sutta speaks about conceit. So it says this body has originated from conceit, and in dependence on conceit, conceit is to be abandoned. It's a bit more difficult to see exactly how the body has originated from conceit, or at least it's not as direct as from craving, but probably we could say that because the conceit I am, the conceit of self, remained in the previous existence, the stream of consciousness moved on to take on a new existence. The stream of consciousness gave rise to a new body, this present body. So in that sense, we could say this body has originated from conceit. But then Ananda says, in dependence on conceit, conceit is to be abandoned. And usually, almost everywhere else in the suttas, when the Buddha speaks about conceit, he speaks about it as a negative quality, something to be overcome. But here Ananda is trying to show that even conceit can be used in a positive way, as a stepping stone or a motivation for gaining liberation. So he gives the explanation. He says that here a certain monk hears that some other monk has attained the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. So he hears this and then he thinks, well, I'm just as good as that monk. If he could attain it, I should be able to attain it too. Maybe he has a sense of pride. And so based on that sense of pride, he undertakes the practice to show that he is just as good as Venerable so-and-so. And so he engages in the practice. And then by developing his insight to the highest level with the attainment of arhatship, he eradicates conceit. and then he gains that taintless liberation of mind. So in this way, we could understand that in dependence on conceit, conceit is to be abandoned. So the first three sections, usually nutriment or food is an object of craving, but we have to use the nutriment, use the food to engage with the practice to overcome the craving for food. And then we become free from nutriment itself. Usually we speak of craving as something to be eradicated, but there's a way that one could use craving to gain liberation. Almost always the texts speak of conceit, asmi mana, as something to be eliminated. But there's a way even to use conceit as a way to gain liberation. But now the question might come up, is there a way to use sexual intercourse as a way to gain liberation? And some later schools of Buddhism had texts, like tantric texts, would speak about sexual intercourse as a means of liberation. But the early Buddhist teaching here, Ananda says, this body has originated from sexual intercourse. So this we all know. But then in regard to sexual intercourse, the Blessed One has declared the demolition of the bridge. Let's take a look at that expression. In itself, it's a little bit of a puzzling expression. Okay, so Maituna is sexual intercourse, and then the demolition of the bridge is represented by this expression, setu gata. Setu is a bridge, and gata is destruction. So the destruction of the bridge. So what is meant by this? I did a little research just to find how this expression setu gata is used elsewhere in the text. So I found in a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Threes, in the sutta, the Buddha says that in the discipline of the Noble One, singing is called weeping. In the discipline of the Noble One, dancing is a kind of madness. And then he says, therefore, O monks, in regard to singing, there is the destruction of the bridge. In regard to dancing, there is the destruction of the bridge. So in other words, destruction of the bridge seems to mean abstinence, complete abstinence. And we find this, I found some support for this in another work called the Chula Nidesa, which here is speaking about or giving a definition of brahmacharya, the celibate life. So the celibate life is the refraining, abstaining, abstinence, avoidance, not doing, not engaging in, not entering upon sexual intercourse, not transgressing the boundary, the destruction of the bridge. And then we find in another context, this is in an Abhidhamma text, comes the definition of right speech. So what is right speech? the definition is in regard to the 4 kinds of wrong speech or verbal transgression, it is stopping, refraining from, abstaining from, abstinence from, not doing, not committing, not engaging in, not overstepping the boundary, the destruction of the bridge. So from these other passages, we could understand that the destruction of the bridge means, in effect, complete abstinence from. And I have to say that this is what the Buddha has declared in relation to monastics. In relation to lay people, he doesn't say the destruction of the bridge, but he says, kamesu michachara veramani, abstaining from misconduct in regard to sensual pleasures. But for monastics, those who are intent on gaining liberation in this life itself, in regard to sexual intercourse, he says the destruction of the bridge. In other words, complete abstinence. And when Ananda said that, then the bhikkhuni realized that Ananda had understood what her intention was in inviting him to come look after her. So then she gets up from her bed, she prostrates with her head at the feet of Venerable Ananda. She apologizes to Ananda and asks for his forgiveness. And then Ananda says, you have committed a transgression in that you have behaved as you did. But since you see your transgression as a transgression and make amends in accordance with the Dhamma, I accept it. This is growth in the Noble One's discipline, that one sees one's transgression as a transgression, makes amends in accordance with the Dhamma, and undertakes future restraint. Okay, so this will end our treatment of Sutta number 159. And now maybe we have some time to take some questions. So please, if you want to ask questions, please use the hand symbol at the base of the participant box. Okay, Ron is the first one to have the hand up.
Yes, good morning, Bhante. Good to see you. Bhante, I have a question. You were speaking about the monk and how the monk is supposed to endure extreme cold and heat and hunger and thirst. And I can see how this would build character, but it also seems that it would put the monk at risk of peril of catching pneumonia, making him prone to illness, unless the Buddha thought somehow this would strengthen his body. And even with alms round, I remember reading some time ago that there were monks, several monks that were suffering from intestinal parasites from going on alms rounds because some of the food was tainted. So I'm wondering, in today's world, now that we know more about medicine and technology, are these things practical, like things like alms rounds or things like having, you know, a monk subject himself to conditions where he could become ill, especially with things like COVID-19?
Okay, let's leave aside COVID-19 for now. Let's just take, you know, under normal conditions. Yeah, the Buddha was very, very sensible in this regard. So the Buddha, his path is called the middle way. So he doesn't expect his monastic disciples to deliberately subject themselves to extremes of heat and cold when it's possible to avoid those things. And so the Buddha, of course, he's allowed monastics to have monasteries and buildings and cottages and huts to stay, to escape. In fact, that's the reason, one of the reasons that we reflect on when we use a dwelling place, we reflect, I use this, si unhasa patigataya, si tasa patigataya. I use it for the purpose of avoiding the heat, avoiding cold, avoiding contact with mosquitoes and gnats and other creeping things. And so we can use these things, like even here in the US, where we have extremely cold weather in the winter, then we can use, you know, pullovers and sweaters, which are now considered like allowable, and overcoats when we go out. Yeah, but we just have to keep them the color that's fitting for the monastic color and use them with reflection, understanding the purpose of them. And as far as alms food goes, I mean, when I lived in Sri Lanka, I often went on alms food, and there were periods when I went on alms food every day. I never had any intestinal problem. If one gets intestinal problem, I mean, that's very rare. And then one would just have to make use of the medicine to overcome that problem.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
Bhante.
I mean, there are probably hundreds and thousands of monks going on alms round in Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka. And the number who get intestinal problems, relatively very few.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Julian.
Hi, Bhante.
Hi.
Regarding the one on the craving, is to be abandoned by craving. I think there's a sutta, right, where there's an ascetic who went to see there's Ananda,
Yeah.
and then asking him about this cessation of craving. Ananda says that true craving, and then he says that something like, how is that possible? And then Ananda says, before you come to see me, did you have a craving to come and see me?
Yeah.
And he said, after having seen me, does a craving still exist? So yeah, I think it's something like that, right?
Yeah. But actually, the word that's used in that sutta, if I remember correctly, is the word chanda, desire.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It's the word desire. So I think it's a Brahmin who comes to, or maybe it's a Brahmin or a wanderer from another sect, comes to Ananda and says, how is it possible through desire to put an end to desire? And then Ananda says, well, before you came to see me, did you have a desire to see me? And then the Brahmin says, yes. And then Ananda says, now that you've seen me, do you still have a desire to see me? And then the Brahmin says, no, because now I'm seeing you, so I don't need that desire anymore. And then Ananda says, well, in that case, one starts off with a desire to attain Nibbana. And then when one attains desire, when attains Nibbana through that desire, then the desire falls away and one doesn't have the desire anymore.
So could it be the same principle here? Yeah?
It's the same principle, but the word used there is chanda rather than tanha.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chung.
Morning, Bhante.
Morning.
Okay. Bhante mentioned that after the Buddha's Mahaparinibbana, Ananda seemed to have like spent a lot of time in Kosambi. Is there any particular reason why that is so?
Yeah, I don't know the reason offhand. I just recall that there's quite a number of suttas in which Ananda is the principal speaker, which begin without mentioning the place where the Buddha is dwelling. And then when it mentions the place where Ananda is dwelling, it's at Kosambi, at Gosita's monastery. It could be that somebody offered Ananda that monastery. Otherwise, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Bhante, and I also read that in the Pali tradition, it seems to state that Ananda was born on the same day as the Buddha.
I've heard that too. I think that's a mistake. Some commentaries say that, but it doesn't seem conceivable to me because when the Buddha was about 55 years old, he said, I'm getting old now. It's getting difficult for me to attend to all of my tasks by myself. I need somebody to help me. And then eventually, of course, Ananda gets appointed the attendant of the Buddha. And so if Ananda was the same age as the Buddha, Ananda would also be getting old, just like the Buddha. And then also, after the Buddha has passed away, there's a sutta where Mahakassapa speaks a bit roughly to Ananda, and he calls Ananda a boy. He says, "You're still a boy." And then Ananda says, "I have gray hairs already, so how could you call me a boy?" Now, if Ananda was the same age as the Buddha, he would be 80 years old. So Mahakassapa wouldn't be speaking to Ananda as a boy. And Ananda wouldn't have to point to gray hairs to prove that he's not a young man anymore.
Okay, thank you, Bante.
Yeah, so I get the impression that Ananda is from the next younger generation, maybe 25, 30 years younger than the Buddha. And speaking about young, the next question is from Young.
Yes. Thank you, Bante. I understand training myself is most important and urgent, but if you come across with evil monks, now we don't have the Buddha or Ananda, what can you do? Is there a teaching of the Buddha for the lay person?
If you come across a what?
Evil monks who seeks
Evil monks, I see. If they come
evil
to you.
things, and they usually they often occupy higher position and
Yeah.
corrupting the world and so on. What lay person can do about it? Is there a teaching of the Buddha?
If the person is known to be really evil, then one could just refuse to support that person, refuse to make offerings. If the person is just, maybe the conduct is not so exemplary, not so perfect, then one should just continue to support them and try to encourage them to do good. But if you know that the person has really violated the fundamental principles of the monastic life, then just one stops supporting that person. Okay.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay. Vinyu?
Yep. Good morning, Bante. It's regarding the two ills of the two illness. As I recall that I read a book by the late Venerable Wapala Rahula.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the page, and he actually put in a picture by Sayu Guru, and he referred that Buddha as the great doctor for the ills of the world.
Yeah.
And that statue is from Japan. My question is this, is the Buddha, the medicine Buddha, is it actually our Buddha? It is, I mean, the Mahayana actually pray to the medicine Buddha.
I see. I see.
Are they the same Buddha or they are different?
Okay.
Because I'm wondering why this Venerable Rahula actually put that picture.
Okay. So in the Nikayas, in the Pali Nikayas, the Buddha is sometimes spoken of like metaphorically as being the doctor who cures the illness of people in the world, or sometimes as the supreme surgeon who removes the arrow of craving from people. And so the image comes, and sometimes like dukkha is considered to be represented as an illness, and the Buddha is one who guides people to overcome dukkha. The Buddha is represented as a doctor, a physician. So based on that, in Mahayana Buddhism, the idea develops that there is, in the eastern direction, the land of lapis lazuli,
Yep.
of crystal light.
Yes.
There's a Buddha who is called Vaisajya Guru,
Yep.
crystal light Tathagata. And then in Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, the special function of Vaisajya Guru Buddha is Xiao Zai Yan Shou Yao Sha Fo. So he's the Buddha who removes obstacles to a long lifespan and extends life. Yeah, so we could say that that is I call this the literal transformation of a metaphorical image that we find in the Pali Nikayas that represents our Buddha, Gautama Buddha, as a doctor in that he removes the suffering from the world.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right. In regards to the Kosambi, I think the a disciple asked, why? I believe that because Venerable Arurundo is living in Kosambi, and that he helped Venerable Ananda to gain enlightenment. I think that normally after Buddha passed away,
yeah,
Ananda actually follow him. I believe so.
Yeah,
that is why
yeah.
most of the suttas after Buddha Parinirvana, Ananda basically appear in Kosambi. That's what I think.
Yeah, but I don't, I'd have to check for the reason of that. I don't recall the reason being mentioned anyplace. Probably just that he found a congenial dwelling place there. Okay, Arturo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
I have two questions. One is a very practical, short question regarding Buddhist practice in general, if that's okay. And then another one more on the subject of the sutta that we just studied.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. The first question is, I'm building a small shrine in my home.
Yeah.
I read that that the shrine should be above every other piece of furniture, but my apartment is very small, so I don't really have space for that. Is it all right if I just place it on a small table?
Yeah, I think that's okay, but you should ensure that when you sit in front of that table to do your devotional practice, that the shrine is higher than your chest, so that the Buddha image is a bit elevated.
Okay, thank you,
but
Bhante.
it can be at eye level, I think, or a little bit above eye level.
Okay, okay, thank you. And then the more like doctrinal question is on the subject of illness. There is a certain writing by a certain monk regarding one sutta where the Buddha teaches that it is, I can't remember the exact sutta, but he teaches that it is widely agreed upon the world that um, certain afflictions are caused by imbalances in the humors of the body and so on, and not necessarily by karma. But this monk argues that that the sutta has been misinterpreted, and he says that every illness is actually the result of karma, but finding its expression through, the biological functions of the body. But I've also read other teachings by other monks that that actually karma is not actually like the cause of everything, and that illnesses are actually just like arbitrary happenings. So I am somewhat confused as to which is the correct interpretation of that sutta, and I would very much appreciate some clarity.
I just have to say that becomes like a big issue that requires some elaborate explanation. And my time is running out because I'll have to go up for the meal. So I'll just have to pass up that question for now. Maybe at a later time we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Bhante.
Yeah, the sutta that you're thinking of, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 36. And I think it's sutta number 20. And I have a note on that if you have the connected discourses of the Buddha.
Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Bhante.
so I'll just have to take Samantha, And that will have to be the last question for today.
Thank you, Bhante. I just want to get some clarification. When we were discussing desire, and that connect, the thought of the will came to my mind, and what the difference between the two are in the two, and also intention, whether there is anything behind that as well. All the three. Yeah, that's all. Just wondering, the will, does that the will has anything to do with the desire, or vice versa?
Of course, the two have wrapped up very closely. Let us say desire is what motivates the will. The will is, maybe we could say that the will is desire put into action. So you have, let's say I have a desire to drink some tea. And so that desire will then get transformed through the will into, I get up from my seat, I go over to the counter, and I prepare myself a cup of tea. So desire is the motive, and the will is the implementation of the desire.
So would that, eventually, are we trying to sort of get rid of this will and think of it as a process of cause and effect to the five aggregates? Would that be the
Well, the will will always remain through the course of the life. And even desire, in the simple sense of desire to do something, will always remain. That desire itself is not necessarily craving. Craving, we could say, is a corruption of desire. It becomes driven by ignorance. But like if I want to go out for a walk, that's a desire, but that's not necessarily a craving.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, so this body is sustained by nutriment, and nutriment is now being served in the dining hall, so I'm going to have to go up for the meal. So we will end for the day. I'll just do a very quick sharing of the merits. And before that, I do that, I want to mention that first, over the July 4th weekend, July 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we'll be conducting a weekend retreat, the teaching retreat, based on the first sermon of the Buddha, which according to tradition was given on the full moon day in the month of July. So you could register for that on the BAO's website. And then starting in July, the second week in July, each month I'll be giving an afternoon program continuing the study of the Abhidharma. So I won't have the Saturday class those mornings. And you'll find, I think the announcement is already up on the BAO's website, working through the comprehensive manual of Abhidharma from starting with chapter 3, since I already covered chapters 1 and 2 in January. So you could find the registration for that again on the BAO's website. Okay, so let us do the sharing of the merits quickly. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Bhavagupadaya Vichihetato Etantare Satakayupapanna Rupya Rupicha Sanya Sanino Dukkha Pumuchantu Pusantu Nibutin.
Sadhu, 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 sadhu.
Okay.
Bhante Bodhi. Be well.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Be well, Bhante.
Bhante, be safe.
See you soon.
Thank you,
Sadhu
Bhante.
Bhante. Sadhu Sadhu Bhante.
Okay, thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Bhante.
Have a happy day, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
I say Venerable Buddha. Buddhadatta, I see in India. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the wonderful class, Bante.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will have to end now.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.